You about ready? You ready? Okay. I guess it's time to get started. Thank you for coming to Bicentennial. And if you have a cell phone, if you'd please silence it, I would greatly appreciate that. Zoomers, you're muted, and please stay muted. And at the end, I will open it up and look at the chat, and you can ask any questions on the chat. So I want to introduce us as our speaker, Dr. Gordon, Dr. Jacob Gordon.
Hello. Oh, good afternoon, friends. How are you all? I'm glad you are back. This is interesting. I have one disappointment as a result of technology. I won't be able to show you the lecture by Dr. Landers from Vanderbilt, who talked about Black communities in Spanish era in Alachua County and in Florida. Very exciting. Not too many people have done that kind of research to be able to determine where were the Black communities during the Spanish occupation of Florida. Well, we are going to try to show you next week. We'll be working with UF. We can't pull it out, so we'll do that next week. Last week, Dr. Kusik gave us a foundation, a background to the study of people who have come to be known as Floridians. For me, it was a very good summary of thousands of years of indigenous people in this area. Even though the bicentennial focus was on Africans and African Americans, I wanted to lay that foundation before European explorers and Africans came here. That was the foundation. Today we are going to follow up Dr. Lander's lecture, but we can't show it. We will try to do that next week. So the topic of today, yeah, keep going. Yeah, keep going. And I'm hoping that you have all received the outline. There are some papers here if you want to pick them up later on. Yeah. One more. One more. Yeah. No. You may have to go back. Let's see. Okay. What's next? No. Keep going there. Let's see. Yeah, okay. This is it. Go on. Hit the bottom, yeah. We're supposed to show this video, but we can't show it. So this is the subject. Yeah, one more down. Yeah, this is it. This is supposed to be the topic for discussion or lecture today. So I'm going to try to cover that. And then maybe next week we can see Dr. Lander's lecture on African American communities during the Spanish occupation. I wondered when I was talking about the making of Alachua County, what does it mean? I decided as a historian not to pursue that in a chronological order. So I did literature review, which allowed me to sum up what are some of the great issues in the making of Alachua County. Based upon that literature review, I've decided to focus on 7 major factors in the making or development of Alachua County. The first, of course, is migration. When we talk about history, people don't seem to think about migration. We look at migration as a separate discipline or something that just happened. In the presentation made last week by Dr. Kusik, talking about indigenous people in Florida and in Alachua County, what we did not talk about was migration, which is a major factor in the development of this county, in fact, of Florida. Assuming now, and research have developed that the indigenous people were the first people to land in this area and stayed for thousands of years. I want to deviate a little bit to suggest another area of research, and that is what we call the Homo sapien migration. We call it ancient migration. There are studies going on right now to document what we call the out of Africa migration ancient times. That may even outdate that of Asians that migrated into the Americas, that we now call indigenous people. Sertama has a book entitled They Came Before Columbus. This is what we call pre-Columbian studies. So that was the first wave of African people's migration outside Africa. The second wave of migration is what we always concentrate on, the transatlantic slave trade. But that was not the first migration. The transatlantic slave trade was a forced migration in which people were enslaved. Not only to come to the Americas, but the rest of the world, UK and the rest of them. We will talk about that maybe next week. The third wave of migration from that continent is what we call more recent migration. Migration in the 1950s, after most of the countries in the continent became independent. Then there was another kind of migration. It is estimated now in our census data that there are more than 2 million African recent migration immigrants in the United States alone. And if you go and look into the census, you see how they are characterized and what they do for a living. These are not illegal immigrants. These are people who came here, some of them in pursuit of a higher education, others came here just for labor force. Some of them came here just like me. I had come here in 1960 to get education and get back. It doesn't always happen that way. So those are three waves of migration that need to be studied. But in the context of Alachua County and Florida, there are two types of migration I want to share with you. One is what I call domestic migration. By that I mean people were migrating within this continent into Florida, namely South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina. I call that domestic migration. The other migration that impacted development of Alachua County is what I call the foreign migration. These were the explorers. First, French. Second, Spanish. With a good number, we documented that, good number of some enslaved Africans that were caught by the Spanish. They brought them here. Estevanico is one of them. And then lastly, the British. They always come last and take over. So So those are the two types of migration that I believe have great impact in the development of Alachua County. It leads me to believe that the Alachua County of Florida, at the very beginning, was a multicultural and multiracial society. These people came with their backgrounds from different parts of the world and invaded what we know as the indigenous culture. Talking about indigenous culture, today in the calendar, which was published by the Equal Justice Initiative, it's a sad day for Alabama. On this very day, in 1832, the General Assembly of Alabama met and made a decision. That decision was simple. The Creek tribe and the Cherokees were asked to start pack their load. And if they didn't pack their load to leave Alabama, they must never practice their cultural traditions. They were prohibited from practicing it. Now, you recall that follows the Land Removal Act of 1830, which impacted on Florida. This was very similar to that, except this was developed by the General Assembly of Alabama. And who were the people who were in the General Assembly of Alabama? They were all European settlers. Some people like to call them white settlers. I call them European settlers. I don't want to describe people by color. And so more than 25,000 of the Creek and the Cherokees died on the way towards west of Mississippi. That's where they were asked to live. And all their land were taken away from them by the European settlers. Well, that's a part of Alabama history, which has impact also on ours. I'm just reflecting. A second very important factor that has helped to shape Alachua County history is the Seminole Wars. There were 3 Seminole Wars. Indigenous people were fighting to retain their land, and it turned into war. Sadly, this war was more than 40 years. It started, the first Seminole War was 1816 to 1818. The second one, which was the bloodiest one, from 1835 to 1850, 1835 to 1842. And then the last one, of course, from 1855 to 1858. But these 3 Seminole Wars had a great impact, not only on the land, but on human beings. People died. They were fighting for their own values, to retain their own civilization in their own land. But they were driven away. I think that has a great impact, and still does as we speak in 2025. What happened to the Seminoles? And here you have to understand the runaway slaves became a part of the Seminoles, and they were called Black Seminoles, who were engaged with them to fight for their freedom. In fact, Black Seminoles established communities in Florida. I don't know whether there was one in Alachua County. I haven't seen it yet, but they established one. Some of them later on escaped and went to the Bahamas. Some stayed. They intermarried with indigenous people, and their life went on. That has to have a great impact. not only in terms of their family, but in terms of their ability to produce, to take care of their families. Another what I think is an important factor in a larger country development is the question of race. We don't want to talk about race, and that's because we don't want to own the history. But we all know what it means. Throughout that history, 1800, even up to 20th century, this society was based upon separation of races. Now, whether that's good or bad, we have what we call in theory and history, challenge and response. Each of these things may sound very negative, but you're also going to see in history how they have allowed us or forced us to engage in working towards a more perfect union. In other words, there are some good aspects of that came out of it, out of the struggle. Okay? So race has been a big factor. Another big factor, which is still a big factor today, another big factor in the making of a larger country history is religion. You recall very early on, Europeans who invaded the indigenous society, particularly in St. Augustine. And what happened there was actually based upon religion. The French, the Spanish thought the French were gone, they were coming to occupy everywhere. And they found out that the French hadn't gone anywhere. The Spanish, what did they do? They were Roman Catholics. They went and butchered and killed those French people from anywhere they could find them, unless they accept the religion called Roman Catholicism. If you agree to become a Catholic, then they spare your life. And some of those French people, their lives were spared. Others said no. Because the Catholics said, your religion from France, Lutheran, is not God's religion. And so we have to make you a part of God's religion, and that was to become a Roman Catholic. Well, of course, this was a very common practice. Even the enslaved people who ran away from Georgia and South Carolina, once they pledged to become Roman Catholic, they were spared, their lives were off. If they didn't, they were killed. Religion is a long story, a human experience. And as we speak, it still plays a very vital part in human civilization. I don't need to mention what's going on in Israel. Fundamentally, that's the problem. And we still have that problem of religion here. Even the Protestants still fight among themselves. Even the Muslims, they still fight among themselves. So it's not a matter of Christianity vis-a-vis other religion. It's just the very nature. And religion plays a very important part in human life. There's no question about that. But how we hijack it to meet our needs is a different story. Religion is a beautiful thing, but it has a great impact in the history of Alachua County. Infrastructure. Infrastructure became very, very important in the development. Without the railroad, I don't know how Alachua County would have looked like. Well, it was the territorial legislature passed a bill, a charter for railroad, about 1835. And the father of railroad actually in Alachua County, he was known to become father of railroad in Alachua County, was David Levy Yulee. David Levy Yulee, the first Jewish man to become senator in American history. He was born in St. Thomas, an African Moroccan father, Moses Elias Levy, who migrated here and, in fact, had one of the biggest plantations in the Ikonopi area. It was his son that really created the railroad all the way from Fernandina Beach to Cedar Key in the 1830s, 1850s, 1860s. It got to Gainesville 1858 or 59, but it got to Cedar Key by 1861. And that opened the door for human ability to travel. Now, I have to note, however, that travel did not provide equal means of transportation to all people in Alachua County. They were all segregated. Okay? So you see the connection in terms of even migration. His father had a dream to leave Morocco. They were Shiite Jewish people, to find a new land in America for the Jewish people. That was his dream. And somebody will argue, this biographer will say, okay, he wanted a new land, he came over here, but he also had a plantation. It took me 2 years to research and find out the names of his slaves on his plantation. Yes, he was born in Africa, but he also had slaves on his plantation. Now, if you read more about his biography, you will find out also that he became an abolitionist. Abolitionist because he argued that if he didn't keep them as slaves, he wouldn't have the labor force he needed to create this Jewish community. Of course, all his plantations were all burnt up. Later on, he went to UK, tried to raise money, he didn't have enough money. That was a part of our history, right here in Alachua County. This is Jewish history, it is human history. But his grandson was even denied a seat in the US Senate because he was Jewish, until he had to go through all kind of stuff. And I know he became a Christian. I also know he became a husband to a young white lady who was the daughter of the governor of Kentucky. The list goes on. I want you to read the biography, see what I'm talking about. But the infrastructure was very critical in developing the state. Now, infrastructure followed on later on in terms of the highways and so on and so forth. But that opened the door for the development of Alachua County. Another important factor in our development is the plantation system. I've just mentioned it in terms of Levy. There's a Levy County named after him. Plantation system was the means of economic development. Simple. And the plantation system depended upon slave labor. Slave labor. There are many plantation systems in Alachua County. My students have documented all of them. I've been to a couple of them. One is the Hale Homestead. I don't know whether I've been there. Try to go there, have a tour of the Hale Homestead and other plantations in Alachua County. They were producing, in fact, Levy was producing sugar, cane to feed into Europe, which became a foundation for the Industrial Revolution in Europe. Okay, including we didn't have cotton here, but was a part of the product. Those who came from South Carolina, North Carolina, we engaged in all of that. That was the industry, to have a plantation system, okay, which depended upon free labor. Well, they took good care of the slaves, or medical, so they can work on the field and produce there. That was very critical in our development. The last but not the least, I thought about it very seriously. I said, let me just give it a very beautiful title: gender inequality. Some people like to call it sexism, and that's the word we don't want to hear. It was a part of the development, was an issue. The role of women in our society remains an issue, but it has always been there. Even before 1821, when Florida became a part of the United States, it was there. It has always been there in all human history that I've studied. The place of the women in human life. It was a challenge. You all know what I'm talking about. That debate was still on, even in Congress. When I watched the television interviewing people who want to become Secretary of Defense, their point of view about women in the military. It is still a global problem. In fact, the issue is so global that the United Nations created an International Women's Day. That's how global it is. You go to China, you go to Russia, you go to Africa. I was raised in that context where women were viewed as inferior. You have to do some cooking, take care of the house, and above all, have some babies. And every religion has supported that concept, regrettably. Almost every religion history that you can study. My own Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, all of them. I used to make a joke. I have a son who's an Anglican priest. I don't know how he combined that with engineering. He did engineering at the University of Kansas. I say, if we're thinking about sexism, maybe the Bible is one of the most sexist books in the world. How many books in the Bible were written by women? I'm assuming that most of you here are Christians. How many books? So I don't know what the answer is. Whether that's the way it's supposed to be. Is that the way God created it? For this perpetual inequality. And he has created a lot of movements in Alachua County. A lot of movements. Women movements. They are segregated, but they were women movements. One of them is still right here in Gainesville. It was created in 1903, more than 100 years old. It's called the Female Protective Society. It's black. Female Protective Society. Still right here in Gainesville. The building is there. And what they used to do. Mary McLeod Bethune, who founded Bethune-Cookman, my alma mater, created the Negro Council of Women in 1935 because of the inequality. And we just lost a good president, Jimmy Carter. In 1950, he initiated the first Women Week history in 1980. And today we still have it. The whole week devoted into women, their contribution to society. It's not a good sign in a democracy. We are yet to have a female president. Mexico has a female president. A lot of African countries have female presidents. UK female president. The list goes on. What will it take to make sure that inequality, gender inequality, is almost sinful? Now, these are my 7 selected major factors that I think have most impacted the development, the making of Alachua County. Now, this is the style I wanted to present it, and to tell you chronologically from 1824, 1825, 1826, we'll be here until doomsday. We won't finish it. Okay? So if you want to study all these things, you want to add more to the issue, we can talk and discuss it and take it out. Now, we are still developing Alachua County, by the way. We are still working on it. We have truth and reconciliation, for example, as a result of some of these practices in the past. We have many, many books published about school education, and we are still wrestling with it. It's not over. Long even after 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas. So they refused to integrate. I did a tour of some with a friend of mine, Carol Kirkman, who specializes in archaeologists on cemeteries. Now, I spent time in Mikonopi. I had a black cemetery and a white cemetery. So even after people die, I don't know what cemetery is going to heaven. I don't know which one is going to hell. I don't know the rationale for it. And I've been studying it. I don't have any answer to it. No one has really given me an answer. Maybe I can get one today. The Free State of Kansas, when I went down there, I went to Independence, Kansas. The first thing they showed me was a black cemetery and a white cemetery. Eventually, they integrated it. But with that integration, you still tell you, here's the black section. Now, I don't know where heaven they're going. Here's the white section. So these are societal issues. And of course, we are going to be talking about civil rights and other movements that responded to all of this before the class. So maybe next week or the following week. Americans responded to this because they still believe, a large part of us still believe, that we are not a perfect union. But the founders knew we are not perfect. But we got to work towards that perfection. Okay, I'm going to stop here for Q&A and then comments that you have. A lot of you I've talked to, you have your own unique experiences. Please don't be too shy to share them with us. Okay, so I'm inviting you to share your experiences and ask questions about what I've already talked about. All right. Who wants to go first?
Any questions, comments for Dr. Gordon? Do you want me to get out of this?
We got time.
No questions on Zoom.
Oh, there's a question on Zoom?
No, no questions on Zoom. You
Okay.
got 6. Oh, wait, someone raised their hand. Rick, are you there? You want to ask a question? Have to unmute. There you go.
I think it's my phone. Did that make anybody sad or what?
Hello? You can
You're
hear
there.
me. Great.
We have tried for us to own our story.
Mhm. So
There's a
thanks.
lot of positive part of this story. Yes.
Yeah, thanks for talking about David Levy-Yulee. And of course, he was so important for Florida and Alachua County. One of the ILR members, Barbara Rothstein, has done some research on his father, and there she is, Moses Elias Levy, who started the plantation in Micanopy for potential colonization, is the word, of for poor Jewish immigrants from Europe, which didn't succeed that well. But nevertheless, you can still find it, and she was able to find his photograph. And I also know that he came from the area of Morocco called Essaouira, or it used to be called Mogador, which was famous for being an important minority, but close to majority Jewish city. And he was a descended from the immigrants from Spain. He was Sephardic. Excuse me. So it was another way that Spain perhaps had an influence on Alachua County. And if Barb wants to talk any further about it, she did some amazing research on this.
Yeah, Chris has a biography on Levy, Chris Monaco. Very good book. Spent a lot of years researching it. Yeah, that's where we came from, but that's not where we are. We've made some progress. We moved on based upon that. Yes, sir.
We've heard an awful lot about the people that settled Alachua County, which is certainly important, but I haven't heard anything about the political structure. I know Florida became a state in 1845, and I know there used to be a book, Florida Under Five Flags, all of that kind of stuff. And was Alachua County a political entity before Florida became a state and all of that sort of thing?
Yeah, there are political structures. Yeah, the policy of Alachua County, yeah. They created a county that was political. They met. We are political parties from very period of independence. And we are still maintaining those two political parties, called different names at different times. Okay, and Democrats, the Republicans later on. And they all have political. Yeah, they have borders. What we have now is far away from the original border in 1824. It was all the way from Georgia to Tampa. It was almost twice as big as it is now. But that was narrowed down. The main decisions were taken by the Territorial Council, which is the Florida legislature. That was the political structure. And other that, you have political parties, then you have county structure, and you have city governance. You're really talking about governance and how they were elected. I serve as a member of the Alachua County History Commission. And one of the things we are doing is to look at ancient documents that will give us who were the first people who served in Alachua County. We haven't written that history yet. It's still there. The documents are there in cursive, in handwriting. It's difficult to transcribe, to be honest with you. We are still working on it. It's work in progress. We should have been done a long time ago. So when I came to the commission, I asked the question, what is the history of this commission? Nobody could tell me. Who were the people first elected? People have good memories. They tell me, my mama was a member of this commission. What year? What did they do? Where are the minutes? We have lost a lot of our history. That's what my challenge especially in terms of Black history, to create this society, to begin to motivate people. We all have stories to tell. And that story is history. But we throw them away. We don't think it's important. History is probably the most important field that impacts human beings. I can tell you how the British and colonialists used history to conquer the whole world. They told everybody their own narrative. They were the most superior people in the whole world. If I want to go to the UK now, I talk, they say, oh, you're talking about these Americans. They don't know how to talk. They have this arrogance after the Queen Elizabeth defeated the Spanish people in the Armada, became supreme. That's the story of the world. Everywhere else has no history except Europe. So history is very powerful, and they are still doing the same thing. You know, one of the things we are trying to do now in history, decolonize history. We call it decolonization of American history, decolonization of African history, because they told their own narratives. They told their stories. But it's very simple. See what happened here January 6th last year. We have different narratives, right? That's history. That's unfortunate. But the less we can investigate them and document them and preserve them and properly disseminate them, then history is lost. Much of the questions you are asking, I've been asking it. I don't have the answer. Except they have a county. Gainesville was not the first seat of the county. But Gainesville got it. Because they got this infrastructure. They got the university that moved here. And it became a big town. And we have been criticized when we talk about Alachua County. They say, oh, you're talking only about Gainesville. You don't talk about the rest of us. How about Archer? How about Micanopy? How about the rest of them? But it's a part of the county. That's just the way it developed. And that's going to be the trajectory. Alachua County, Gainesville is going to continue to be the most developed city in the county. Now, don't quote me on that.
Any other questions?
Because you have this organization here. Look at OMAC. Where do you have OMAC in Archer? It's not going to be there. More questions and comments. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Rick.
Nobody else on Zoom? Okay.
Oh, Barb wanted to speak.
Yeah.
Unmute yourself, Barb.
Okay, I'm at the museum in Micanopy right now. Yeah, I won't get on my soapbox. I just wanted to go on with Rick's just thing about the plantation from Moses Levy, and it didn't succeed for several reasons, one of which he brought people over from Europe who were not farmers, but he was teaching them to be farmers. He had a school for the Jewish children, and he had a school for the Black children that he had bought as slaves from the Seminoles. They were friends. He was an anti-slave person who spoke in Europe to save his own neck. But when the Seminole War came, our own troops burned down the plantation and supposedly to keep the Seminoles from getting it, and were supposed to repay him. And it took him 20 years in court to get it repaid. So that I'll just get off my soapbox. But Moses Levy became the director of education for the state of Florida and was helped with putting many of the schools together. And thank you very much. The talk is really great. I'm enjoying it.
Thank you. I'll be coming to visit you. I have a friend who's a member of the Historical Commission also. Ashley Wood is a member of the Historical Commission. So how many of you went to the Bicentennial Festival at Depot Park last Saturday. Nobody? What happened? Well, I've asked many people that question. They have some, their answer is fine. It was too cold. I was there, I couldn't stay more than 2 hours. I thought I was back in Kansas. It was very, very cold. They had a big program, elaborate program, but there was just nobody there. Yeah, that was unfortunate. I'm hoping that we can continue to do that. My challenge right now is to look at USA 2050 next year and see what role did we play in US history. Florida has played many roles, great roles in US history. We will be 250 years old next year. It's time to start thinking and working with local community people, especially the churches. We have so much segregated churches in Alachua County that I can't even talk about. Giving alone. And for the most part, it's still very much the same. Very much the same. But those are the cornerstones of our community. Institutions. Next week, if we can access it, Dr. Dixon is going to talk about the role of race in our history. We're getting better, but it's still there. It's still there. Yeah. Any more questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate your presence.